going to start by having Anand and Nish ask some questions. Let me first tell you some things that I heard that resonated for me. Karen, first, thank you for explaining why the Department of Education cares, and if only at the end of this, when we are talking over refreshments, you can tell me if you agree that this is not yet, anyway, a K-12 phenomenon. And is that important? Andy, I was very keen to hear that your background in distance education comes from television, satellite broadcasts, because our distance education here at UMass Boston has a very similar background, and I think that really impacts the way we look at everything, including instructional design. I thought that was interesting to know. John, you spoke about going head-to-head, and I wonder if it isn't maybe hand-to-hand, given how many people from what our provost calls the other side of the red line are here working with us today. But you also talked about a bubble that will pop, and I will mention what one of my designer friends in the back has said when we said, well, we're going to do MOOCs. She said, yeah, could it maybe be the next Second Life? And we laughed. But I agree with Dennis when he told her, well, we're going to learn an awful lot about design. AK, terms that really jumped out at me. MOOC as having a form factor, and MOOCs as educational incubators. You always make me think, and I really thank you for that. Dennis, as you know, I am a composition instructor by academic background, and I will someday show you a piece of writing I did about how my entire accomplishment as a writer changed when I got on the computer keyboard and revision was integral to the process. So I thought it was fascinating that you talked about that as your example of something fundamentally different about cognition and process that comes from e-learning. Now, if you would, I hope I've vamped and given you some time, Nish and Anand, if you have specific questions and ideas that you want to poke. Meanwhile, I will ask if Kevin and Rizarda will be ready when they're done to take microphones in hand, and I will take questions from the audience second. All right. Push the button up, see if you can get it to go. You should have a green light on.
Hello, yes. Yes, this is Nish. My question is essentially to Andy first, and again I would like others to also respond to it, that the MOOCs are sort of outsiders in the university system, although they are starting from the university system. So first I would like to know when the first experiment happened with Sebastian Tron getting 165,000 students, there was a lot of confusion about whether they should get Stanford credit or they should get some kind of a certificate, or later on what I found there was one handwritten certificate from Sebastian himself. So, and later on I also know that there was new vice president assigned for experiment with MOOCs. So I want to see this, the conversion from mainstream university, and I know that EDX is going through some of the same issues, then how do we connect the mainstream educational bureaucratic system to some of these experiments like MOOC, where the number of students is just out of the bound with the university model?
Stanford's a very bottom-up university, and I will tell you the quick story about Sebastian Thrun, whom I've known for many years. Sebastian was a fellow along the World University, but Sebastian did something that was quite unique. He did it without telling anybody. So we in the Stanford administration were quite surprised one day when we read a press release about this new course that was going to be offered, and that there would be a Stanford certificate issued with it, and that Stanford students would be compared to students around the world. And let's just say that the provost's head exploded when he saw that. It was just quite unique. So we spent, a small team of us spent a few weeks trying to help Sebastian least understand how the universities work. We were very enthusiastic about the idea, but people like the registrar and the bursar and the provost and others needed something with the legal office, needed some element of control. But we loved it because it forced us to think differently, which was great. So then we had another set of faculty in the same department, Daphne Kohler and Andrew Ray, of course, who did machine learning, who also then decided with the chair of the computer science department to try an experiment. So we had all these experiments going on, all very different, which is great. That's what Stanford's all about. You do things differently, and it's the way it should be. Now the question for Nish is that how do you pull that together? Our colleagues at MIT have done, I think, a pretty good job at least branding it and doing that. Stanford decided to put into place a new position, the vice provost for technology, whose job it is to try to work across all the schools of Stanford. Stanford's very decentralized with its different schools, and they don't typically work together. So in theory, John Mitchell, computer science faculty member, is in the middle of this to try to pull these elements together. But the important one, and I didn't mention, and that is, how do you get faculty members to change behavior? You have some mavericks who try some radical things, but that's a small percentage. How do you get other faculty members to think about doing things differently? And you know, it's what we say if you're in higher ed administration, you get faculty members to do something, it's like herding cats. You can't do it. So how do you herd cats? You move the food. Right? You put the food. And for faculty members, what's the food? The food is additional resources, maybe credit towards promotion and salary increases, maybe facilities, extra support. So at Stanford, we have moved the food a bit to get faculty members to have an incentive by giving them internal grants to develop MOOCs and to experiment that way. So that's how we've done it.
Quickly step in for that, and I think there are two things. The first thing is that faculty will be innovative, and the anecdote comes in from a recent Sloan C blended conference, and I think the anecdote comes from the University of Central Florida when they were doing blended learning, and faculty were just doing it. They were telling their students, you know what, this course will be these days on campus, these days online. There was a lot of variation, but the administration didn't know what was happening. And this is when they reined it in a little bit and said, okay, we need to think about it this a little more systematically so that we can apply the quality that people expect from our institution. And I think the same case can apply to MOOCs. The second thing, I think, is tenure and promotion. I've approached a number of my friends who are faculty here at UMass Boston, and I approached them on the subject of MOOCs. I think the subject that you're teaching is really cool. Maybe we don't need to do a 12-week MOOC on this. Maybe we can do a 5-week targeted course on this particular aspect of the course. I think it would be really interesting to a number of students. And the response I got back is, I'd love to do it, but after I get tenure, because I have these many papers to do, there's a certain formula that I have to go through in order to get my tenure. So I think it's important to encourage pre-tenure faculty to take those leaps of faith and experiment and realize that even when an experiment fails, you can learn valuable data that you can apply to the future.
And John Flores, I'm seeing you animated.
Yeah, I just want to comment that a lot of the discussion and a lot of the rhetoric that we're hearing today is also available at the USDLA org website, usdla.org. We have a USDLA Connect, where a lot of these same kinds of discussions are ongoing on a regular basis. So I would encourage all of you to take a look at that. In particular, a lot of the comments that I made today, for example, were the result of a lot of the information that we get as feeds from the Chronicle of Higher Ed, as well as another group called Education Dive, which gives you a lot of opportunity, if you will, to become part of discussions that deal not only with books, but things impacting higher ed as well as K-12. So, as I'm listening to the discussion, it triggered that to just remind people that that is also available subsequent to this time is
Anand, did you have any questions?
Sure. So let me ask this question, and it would be great if each of the panelists can take a quick crack at one brief point. So if you were to wave a magic wand, and you were to see edX or MOOCs do one thing, what would, that they don't do today, one innovation or one big thing or something that you wish they would do, what would that one thing be?
Go ahead, Karen. I see you
Yeah,
ready.
I mean, again, it kind of gets back to your thing about, what is this K-12 or higher ed or what? And there's this continuum between about, 8th, 9th, 10th grade and kind of sophomore year of college or community college or whatever. There's a continuum there, and there are a set of about 25 courses that make up about 50% of the enrollment. Somebody create those courses using the basic learning theory and provide them freely, openly for people of all ages. That is what I would love somebody to do.
You know, that list of 25 courses? Right?
Good. And my answer would be that we would use MOOCs to replace the entire junior year of high school, which seems like it's a torture chamber that we've developed for our students. But fortunately, I have one in college and one out of college, but just looking back at it and seeing neighbors' kids, that's what I would do with them.
Well, my focus would be a greater sensitivity to people with disabilities. A percentage of our population who would not otherwise be able to access these courses if there are issues around hearing or something.
Yeah, I would concur with him. I think if we're going to truly democratize what the internet is all about and what it can offer, making sure that anyone from any place, from any walk of life has access to the same opportunities that those folks who are attending, if you will, the most elite universities of the world or even the K-12 school systems have access to. And I find it interesting, Karen, you mentioned the top 25 courses that most K-12 school districts offer. Through USDLA, we've done a lot of work with Florida Virtual School. And I found it really fascinating. Last week I was talking with Julie Young, who was doing some research on what are the most sought-after courses at Florida Virtual, which is probably the biggest online virtual high school in the world. Hundreds of thousands of enrollments. And when you ask the question, what are the top 2 courses that Florida Virtual offers, you would immediately think, oh, maybe it's Algebra 1, maybe it's Algebra 2, maybe it's biology. It's none of the above. The number 1 course that they offer, online virtually, is physical education, followed by driver's education. So think about it.
The thing that I would add to MOOCs in general is proper identification of entry-level behaviors or knowledge from students. As designers, we don't design the class that is applicable to every single person. There are certain entry-level behaviors or knowledge that learners need to have in order to participate in the class. And when learners don't know that, when a course is open and free, they'll just enroll. And then when the course doesn't apply to them, they'll just stop participating. But from an analytics point of view, when I'm looking at that as an instructor, I think, okay, I've got, this 90% of students who is not here. What's going on? When those people aren't actually there. So by identifying proper entry-level knowledge that will enable students to successfully complete a course, we are making the MOOCs more relevant to them. And then those people who actually drop out or don't participate, we know that something went wrong. And how can we better design a MOOC? What sort of sustainability measures, be it more TAs, more online labs, better learner support? What can we do to help those learners when we have, those people who would stay in anyway because the entry-level knowledge isn't something that they already had?
For me, it comes back to that X and C with the MOOCs. It's something I really love to explore a little bit more, in the sense that I'm kind of torn between the idea of a social constructivist approach to learning, or a connectionist approach to learning, and the ability, I know Nish has really been working a lot with this, of using real-time learning analytics to drive instruction. I'd love to be able to, it comes down to me, to really better understand how people learn. So that's what it is.
Okay. Now I think this would be a great time to take some questions from folks who are out here. Rosarto will be coming around with one microphone. Kevin will be coming around with another. And I think, Rizarta, you've got your first questioner back there. And Kevin, I see someone at the middle table, Tara, I believe. So we'll cue that one up. Whenever you're ready, thank you.
Hi, my name is Bill Hoover. I teach at Bunker Hill Community College and have done 7 years of digital pedagogical research. And teaching online for the past 7 years, I think one of the biggest challenges that I've had and that I'd like to address to the panel and also edX is to say, well, one thing that I notice is really missing in an online environment is that it seems as though students are in what I would consider an educational labyrinth all by themselves. And what I would like to see, or is it possible to have some of these grassroots meetups between students so that they were able to actually effectively communicate to each other, because for one, they communicate much differently online than they do in person. They will say things online that they maybe shouldn't say, or say things they would just blurt out, and they lose the ability to be able to communicate effectively with another human being whenever they're in these online environments exclusively. So I'd like to hear your feedback as to how you think that might evolve over time.
I would say, yeah, I'm sure many, I would just say learning is inherently social, and the social interactions for learning are pretty interesting, both in person and online. And I think what is incredibly interesting is that with the absence of only being able to interact with a professor, these study groups do spring up online, and as Anand, described, they spring up, they help each other, they begin to to support each other. So I think that I think it's an area for an incredible opportunity for research to really understand how can we best support people in building and creating their own social network, their own personal learning network, because that is how people, learn with each other.
Yeah, and the concept of crowdsourcing, I have a quick story to mention them. My daughter is an economics major, and she was struggling with a problem set, and we had a guest over from Azerbaijan who immediately got on her laptop, went into our network, and was online with somebody, and patched it into somebody in Norway to help her solve a problem. The ability to be able to connect up, and when you have literally thousands of potential connections, if you're working problems in a MOOC, think about this, that 3 o'clock in the morning, there's somebody, it's there 10 in the morning, there's always somebody there that can help you. That's really quite incredible.
Let me give you 2 examples. The British Open University for many years, when they would have distributed education, they would do it on television, but they would have local groups who would convene and talk about it in a community. And Coursera experimented with that. They had the Coursera picnic, right, and I think it was in Menlo Park. They thought maybe 50 people would show up, 500 people showed up. So they had an engagement that went from the electronic to the personal. So one could envision over time these geographic pockets. People get to know each other initially electronically, but then they come together for study groups and they have a beer together, that kind of thing.
What I would say is all learning is scaffolded learning, and one of the nice things about MOOCs, or one of the advertising points, is that this is an open resource. Once it's done, at least with the connectivist MOOCs, once the course is done, you can go on it on your own pace. I tried that last summer. There was a MOOC that ran January to May, but I was a little late to the party. So I tried it June to September, and I was the only person there. Let me tell you, it was a very lonely experience. I got a lot of the context, but I really wanted that classmate, or that group of classmates where I could bounce ideas from. Given that, I think that there needs to be a definite time constraint for courses. It runs between this day and this day so that there's a coordinated group of people participating, and within that you can create learning cohorts essentially. And when you take it to a global model, I'm a member of a couple of Facebook groups, Coursera Students of Greece and edX Students of Greece, and people who take courses through Coursera or edX post on those Facebook groups. They do coordinate, and they do meet in various major cities in Greece to compare notes, compare understanding, quiz each other, and it builds this learning community, both virtual and in person. It's really important to learn it.
Well, my thought on that is that you may have just come up with a way to monetize MOOCs. We could provide this excellent content in solitary confinement, and we would charge for the ability to work within a learning community of others like you who want to get out of their solitary confinement. Are there more questions? All right, I see one out here. And I think, well, we'll go to Bill first. I think I saw Bill.
Tara, please.
Oh, Tara? Okay, Tara's got the mic, great.
I must say that I've enjoyed everyone's presentation here, and Nisha heard before also, and Anand, and all the panelists. What I wanted to say was, I come from a tradition where teaching is a very noble profession, and we give it free. And commercialization later even. So what I think is, giving away the knowledge is no problem, but how to sustain it is the next problem, because it's really technology driven, it's money driven. But what I thought was, and I loved AP's conversation about language, right? Because you're a linguistic person, and all these things I really love. And I must mention, she has just taken me step by step in every event. And today I've come to a stage where I give an online class, and the other day in a seminar, a student was there, and she just comes and says, "Are you Pattares? I took your class." And she said, "I just love the content. It was really a lot. I want to master it. I want to get graduate and a PhD in that." So that was the joy, right? But how would we sustain it is, if we give it free, before that, let's take a pledge. Once you start using this knowledge for earning a lot of money, please contribute.
Yeah, the community service, the term
So
community
now that will be
service.
mandatory,
Yeah.
not choice.
Yeah.
Once you are made, you have learned, you have a responsibility to pay back. And that will keep the ball rolling, and the cycle will keep going, because they will be committed, because they got it free, and they should have respect for it. And they have the community, and they would love to contribute again, because they got into a habit of being in the community, learning community.
Now, I see you want to respond directly to that. Do you want to just walk to the mic? And, yeah, okay. And then we'll come back to you, Bill.
Good evening, my name is Elise Musa. I'm an educational technology entrepreneur, which arose out of a pain point, and that was actually college student debt. So I've heard a lot of conversations here about sustainability. I've heard revenue mentioned just as many times. And at the heart and center of what we're doing with MOOCs, it's really for the students. And I feel like what we haven't talked about was the debt side, and are we looking at sustainability and revenue in the old context? Because it's not working as well. It's $1 trillion problem.
Right, right. We've heard AK say we need some kind of assessment for the learner to go through to determine, is this MOOC right for me? But what if we had an assessment once our inventory of MOOCs is large enough, where if I go to edX or Coursera or Course Sites or wherever, and I express interest in a certain field, and I take a certain exam, I get recommendations as I would from a good college advisor. So maybe it's just we don't have the inventory to do that yet, or we might already be doing it, but that's my thinking on that. And go ahead, Bill.
Yes, question. I'm beginning to wonder if a world awash in MOOCs is a good idea. And the question is, edX is crushing it clearly. Very interesting work being done. But how do we maintain quality in MOOCs? How does one decide what course to take and what not to take?
I have to say that as an online coordinator, I am outside of the faculty group, although I collaborate with my faculty a lot. And that is something that we talk about on campus and traditional online. You know, what is quality? If we offer a course for 13 weeks, and we offer a course for 6 weeks, it's the same course, but are they different because they're different time lengths? And what is the quality? And if I'm offering this course in our department and this course, 2 different courses, they're both worth 3 credits. How do we measure quality? And that's something that I think in higher ed, we still struggle to answer for our traditional courses, both on campus and online. So I think this is a really interesting discussion to have. I'd like to, before I give up the mic, I'd like to address 2 things. What Tara said, the feeding forward, I think this is one of the principles of Creative Commons. So you get a Creative Commons work and you can license it as share alike. So if I'm creating my syllabus, let's say for a mobile learning class, I'm going to put it out there on the internet for free and say, anybody who wants to use my syllabus, you can take it, you can modify it, but I really request that you share your modifications to it so that everybody can learn. I think that's really important, and I think as we're developing MOOCs, we're also developing open educational resources that aren't closed up behind MOOC doors, that other people can repurpose and reuse, so that brilliant physics professor or computer science professor, if there's a specific lecture on automata, somebody can take that and say, you know what, this particular piece really says it really greatly, I can't say anything better, I'll use it in my MOOC. And then in educational debt, looking at models like Western Governors University, I think there's a discussion in higher ed where there's a decoupling of education and assessment/credentialing. So you could theoretically have a MOOC where you're learning, but you're not formally being assessed, and then you have that university structure to be assessed and get college credit, which could potentially in the future, if everything falls right, lower the cost of education. And I believe that the cost of education needs to be lowered.
Let me add to that, add something to that. MOOCs are dangerous. What do I mean by that? It means that you're opening up your university to people who've never seen you before. So if you're a poor teacher, you're not just sharing with 50 people, you're sharing with 50,000 people. So one could envision over time the quality issue could come forth by having people around the world rate and grade your class, thumbs up, thumbs down. And the poor classes will fall away because people will read the reviews of those classes, and perhaps not take them. So the challenge is when MIT or Berkeley or Stanford or UMass, you're putting your name on something, you're exposing your brand. And it better be great, because the downside is you degrade the institution.
I'd like to say that the other side is that it is dangerous. It's Pandora's box in a lot of ways. But when we're talking about, when we're talking specifically about the cost of education now, here's a potential, it's free. And how does that really undermine the structure of the university? We have a particular business model, and tuition and grants and endowments are as small as they are, the state support, go a ways to help create this thing called the university. Will the MOOC be something that is as valuable as a university degree? I mean, so there's potential for real disruption, if we can say. And I think that's one of the scary things, but also one of the exciting things, because we do have to look how better to educate the public in a way that it's not, we're not just talking about sustainability of MOOCs, we're talking about sustainability of the educational system.
I would tend to agree with comments that I've heard, but at the same time, I think when we think about MOOCs in higher education, as I mentioned earlier, as we begin to create standards, if you will, that qualify as to what makes a course that represents the highest standards and levels of excellence, I think a lot of these questions will be answered. When I think of the MITs and I think of the Stanfords, a lot of those kids who perhaps take those MOOCs, they're going to learn in spite of whomever the university is and whomever the teacher is. Anna, you mentioned earlier that there was a time where, in terms of really understanding learning pedagogy, most teachers at the higher education level really were engaged in that. You just went by, flew by the seat of your pants. The opposite is true in K-12. You learn methodology, you learn pedagogy from early on, and it's expected of you to integrate that into your classroom. That's one of the differences between K-12 and higher ed, but I think what's critical, you know, the MOOCs are at an embryonic state in terms of their existence. It's up to us as professionals within the distance learning community to demand that the overall quality of what becomes a MOOC represents certain standards that we all can agree upon, to be sure that there are instructional designers involved and engaged in the development of a course, that it's more than just a YouTube video. As much as I love Sal Khan and what he's done, I mean, that's basically what they are. The YouTube videos, passive, you sit there, you watch them, and you discuss. As an educator, we can find fault with that. The business community loves it, because they see it as a business and an opportunity, because it's going to be a bottom line driven phenomenon. For those of you that read Forbes magazine, you know that this past November issue, Sal Khan was the cover. He is the poster child of what a MOOC can become in terms of what the industry will show. Even though he's taken the noble approach, this is totally nonprofit. Forbes is not a nonprofit kind of magazine. It's a for-profit entity, so money will still drive this as time goes on. I think one way we can look at this is to look at what publishing companies have done. Publishing companies today more and more want to become online entities. And if anyone has established, if you will, a cadre of instructional designers, solid curriculum designers, support personnel to create courses that I think match all of those kinds of requirements from a pedagogical perspective, it's the publishing industry. So I think we have something to learn from them also, besides just creating, if you will, a video that we think students want to watch, get into a discussion. And perhaps that's why one of the reasons is that you start with 100% of students taking, but only 5% finish.
And now, Kevin, we have that one more question. We're going to have to limit it to that because we're over time. And then, oh, I see one more hand here. Okay, we'll try to sneak one in. Maybe we'll hear two. Well, let's hear both questions, and then we'll put it to the panel. So let's hear one question and then the other, and then we'll move through.
I'll try to make mine quicker. Hi, my name is Luis Rodriguez from the Office of Digital Learning at the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So looking at the K-12. I was wondering, are any high schools actually letting students take MOOCs as elective credit at this point in time? And you've already alluded to the quality piece and some of the other layers that maybe would need to occur before that happens. I was just wondering if there actually are any high schools at this point in the U.S. letting students take MOOCs as an elective course, getting them credit for it.
All right, terrific. Anant, did you want to cover that one? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we have they don't want the school or the person to be publicized, but in a top-rated school in the Massachusetts area, they actually did give credit for one of my courses. We've also been contacted by many school districts, one or two of them in the Massachusetts area, where the school district is looking to cancel an AP physics course because less than 5 students take it, which is a real tragedy. And so they are exploring with edX, offering freshman level AP courses in high schools to make up for the lack of AP in really good quality districts. UT Austin, which is part of the edX partnership, want to create a whole slew of AP courses. In fact, they want to go one step beyond. They want to create a whole slew of on-ramps courses in pre-calculus and so on. So really, we are moving in the direction that Karen would like.
All right, and by the way, Luis, I'm so glad that you were able to make it. Luis Rodriguez is the director of the Office of Digital Learning for the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. I was excited that you might be here. I didn't realize you are. That's wonderful. Was Susan also able to make it? And Susan Hargrave is here. Susan is the coordinator of digital learning and accessibility for the Office of Digital Learning, Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And I wanted to make sure to do a call out to you so that Karen knows that you're here, and you guys may want to talk shop after we take this last question.
Thank you. A sincere thank you to the panel and the keynote speakers. It was a fabulous discussion. And I know it's just at the beginning of these discussions. I wanted to pick up on something that Dennis had said, because I'm showing my research positionality here with my fascination in on how people learn. And when you mentioned, Anat, in your presentation, that there's a lot of pedagogical research on learning using the big data, I just didn't know what kind of gems that you've been finding so far. In addition to the green check mark, I was just wondering if anything else is emerging from the data.
It's a treasure trove of data, and I'll give you one example of what you've got. And right now, it's simply studying, doing studies with all the data. One example is we all wonder when students succeed, or the successful students versus the not so successful students, where did they spend their time? Did they watch the videos? Did they do exercises? Did they read the textbook? So I didn't show the chart here. I showed the chart in a longer talk. So we have data that shows where did students spend their time. We have data for students that did not pass the course and students that passed the course. And for students that passed the course, you can see just it goes exponential in terms of how much time they spent on the assessment. Textbook is used as average, but the strong, you can begin telling correlations between success and how students are spending their time. And we can track exactly what students do. Where are they spending their time? What parts of the textbook they're spending a lot of time on, less time on? What videos are they doing? We have all of this data, so we can tell what students are doing and how it correlates to success.
And why is Nish nodding? Why does Nish keep nodding as Anant is speaking?
Let me follow up on what Anand said. We have done a lot of research, including at MIT earlier and later on in other institutions. The students do learn differently, and they have different learning strategies. And I mentioned in my part of the talk that we are using 5 different strategies, which is step-by-step learning, learning by storytelling, learning by examples, learning by doing, and learning by interactively, like game-based learning. What we are also finding out that not only students learn differently, but they learn different content differently. It's not that if you are an inductive learner, you will remain inductive all the time, but depending on the content, you will change. And this is where I'm going with the experiment at UMass, is that what we want to understand there with the MOOC, which will be adaptive MOOC, that providing them 5 different learning strategies and following their trajectory and creating another treasure trove to say on top of their learning psychology, you understand what is the mental makeup. And if you look at the literature of constructivist model or cognitivist model or even behaviorist model, you understand that people do have different learning methodology based on their background and their psychology and brain models. So I think there is a lot to learn from these kinds of massive experiments. So I think when we provide those distinctions in the MOOC environment, where they can choose different learning strategies and succeed, then we can start seeing correlation between learning strategies, learning models, brain-based models, and their success. So I think this is an opportunity that we all want to applaud and get involved with. So I do invite you to get involved with this experiment and see what we can do together.
Thank you very much. I want to give you quick mini announcements that relate to a couple of things we've been hearing. We've been listening about the need for assessment and credentialing and to understand that better in the world of MOOC and open courseware in general. On March 20, the Center for Innovation and Excellence in E-Learning will be running a summit on alternate credentialing. And is Jonathan Finkelstein still here? Are you there, Jonathan? Jonathan is with badgestack.com, which is, I believe, a division of Learning Times. And he will be our keynote that day on March 20. Details to be announced, still to be worked out. And we're going to be putting that together with Jonathan. But stay on the CIEE, or Center for Innovation and Excellence in E-Learning website for updates on that. The second theme is basic research and dissemination of basic research. One of the missions of the center is to publish. We have our first call for papers for the Center for Innovation and Excellence in E-Learning peer-reviewed journal, which is titled Current Issues in E-Learning Education. And I am happy to let you know that AK is co-editor of that journal, and I thought it was best to announce that after you got to hear some of the brilliant ideas that he's got. And thank you for being on the panel, AK. Thank you for being on the panel, everybody. It was wonderful. Anant, thank you very much. Nish, thank you very much. Don't leave anybody up here without your parking passes. And please stay, and everyone stay and join us for light refreshments. This has been a wonderful event, and we really thank you for coming, and we thank you for contributing.